So a fad that I've really been wanting to do because it looks super fun, but it's actually killing fish, not only mine but other people's. It's the Nano tank setup for fish aquariums. This is like a small, teeny aquarium, under 5 gallons generally, that you keep and have a small tank that'll fit on your desk or like in your kitchen or somewhere. And even though they look amazingly cool, and they're like usually like aquascapes, like a bunch of plants and wood and rocks, make it look all decorative and artistic, it usually has a lot of problems which cause experienced and unexperienced fish keepers a lot of grief. The biggest thing that causes problems with Nano tanks is they're extremely hard to control the water parameters. So the initial part of setting up the tank, getting it cycled, is extremely difficult because the water volume is so low that the bacteria and everything's really, it'll have like a spike of ammonia, and then the bacteria will try to catch up and grow to that amount, and then it'll eat it all, and then it'll go really low, and then the beneficial bacteria will die off. And so that up and down that small water volume has makes it really difficult for the beneficial bacteria in your tank that creates the nitrogen cycle to really get established. Another part of the water parameters is like if you put in fish, if you overfeed them or do anything like that, it can have an ammonia spike as well, which can cause all sorts of havoc on the ammonia cycle, on the nitrogen cycle, and can result in death of your fish or other aquatic animals. For example, I got some Neo shrimp. I don't love working with RO water or other types of water like distilled water and having to get the parameters just perfect, but I live in Utah and Neo is like really soft water, and Utah, because of all the mountains, has really hard water. And so I tried to test that out on that, and I'm like, oh, let's do a really small tank, because then I don't have to have as much RO water or like or distilled water. And so like, perfect, I'll just do a small tank, it'll solve a lot of my problems and go from there. Well, I got about 15 shrimp, and when I put them in there, with shrimp, obviously you should just generally plan on some of them dying if they're a sensitive type of shrimp. After they start having babies and everything, you can keep them just fine, but shrimp generally have a hard time transitioning to a new home. Well, one had died and was underneath an Indian almond leaf inside my tank, and then polluted the whole water with a ton of ammonia, and then all the shrimp died off, and it was just, I couldn't keep up with it, and they all just died off tragically. But that's one thing that causes that, is when you have a really low water amount, the problem is the water, if anything happens, the water gets affected a lot more than if you had a bigger tank volume. A rule that a lot of people don't realize or don't understand is actually the bigger the tank is, the easier it is to take care of. So it's generally easier to take care of a big tank than a small tank, and so it's one reason why Nano tanks are so hard, is because of that ammonia and cycling process. Another thing with the water parameters is whenever you add water, it affects the parameters a lot more. So in most places, your pH will fluctuate coming out of your tap a little bit. Part of it's if they've done stuff with chemicals to like treat it, or the temperature of your water, or the time of year, can all affect the pH. And so if you add water to your tank and the pH is dramatically different, on a big tank it wouldn't affect as much because it would dilute it out, but in a small tank there's not as much to dilute, and it has a much bigger effect on it. Also, you have to be careful when you add water to your tank, it has the same temperature as your current tank water, because it can change the water dramatically and be stressful for your fish. So those are some things that are also more difficult. Can be really hard to make a Nano tank actually work really well. Another thing is, depending on what type of fish you have inside your tank, you can also have problems with, like, all fish have some aggression, And so in a nano tank, there's just not as many places for fish to hide, and so the aggression can make it so that some fish don't have the opportunity to hide and get away from that aggression, so they just keep getting picked on and dying. Whereas in a bigger tank, they could hide behind a rock or swim across the tank and get out of their eyesight, and then they could recover and eventually establish a hierarchy in the tank, and nobody gets harassed overly too much. And then another one, also a little bit to do with water parameters, is the if you ever have sick fish, you can obviously add medication or salts to help with whatever fish sickness they have, depending on the type. But you have to be extremely precise in a nano tank, because most medications for fish, if you give them too much, can be lethal to them, or at least cause major health problems. So I'm not super precise when it comes to that type of stuff. So for me, if I ever had to medicate a nano tank, it would be stressful because I'm not very good at being exact on things like that. So that's one thing also to look out for. But nano tanks look awesome. They look super cool. I wish I could do it effectively. I also can't grow plants, so that also makes me mad, but that's another story. But there's a lot of things that can go wrong in a nano tank, and I don't want people to start going into getting a nano tank because they look cool and then get discouraged about the fish hobby. I would definitely suggest, hey, if you're a beginner fish keeper, start off with at least a 10-gallon tank. Anything smaller than that is difficult to be able to do things effectively in the tank. That can make it so that you can do things wrong on accident and learn from. And the bigger the tank is, the more forgiving it is. The smaller the tank is a lot more final say, like water temperature going off can be a lot more deadly. So yeah, just a fun little thing that I wish I could do better at, but yeah.